We'll call the September 15th second budget hearing to order. Commissioner Smith, you want to just give us a prayer of invocation in the pledge, please?
Let's listen now to the prayer. Most gracious Almighty Father, we come once again and say thank you for the blessings you bestowed upon us. Thank you for this opportunity to come to take of the business of this council. We ask, Father, that you allow us to continue to be good stewards of the resources you have given us. Bless this meeting, we pray in thy Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Edward, you ready to go?
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. So tonight marks the final budget hearing, public hearing that is required by TRIM, by Florida statute. You're required to have a final budget hearing. And so tonight will mark that final budget hearing. In this budget hearing, you're required to set the millage rate, which will be the final millage rate for the fiscal year 21-22, and then you will adopt a final budget this evening. So this presentation is very similar to the first public hearing. I'll go through this one a little quicker. I'm not going to go through it as much as lengthy as I did last time, but I want to kind of cover the same types of areas as much as I can for the public's benefit. So the agenda, we'll talk about the process, the calendar, we'll talk about the highlights in this budget, the major infrastructure improvements, major capital items, grant applications that we are still waiting on that are still outstanding, substantial items that were excluded in last year's budget. I think it's important to go over those. Then we'll do a budget overview of the citywide budget, and then we'll kind of talk about some general fund budgets. That, as you know, is the largest fund, the major fund that runs all of most of the city services. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll have questions at the end. So the budget process, there's a budget calendar. It's the TRIM process. As you know, it's a state statute. We have to follow all of the guidelines of TRIM. They call it truth and millage is the process. It typically begins in March or April. The property appraiser on June 1st has to deliver an estimated taxable value to each jurisdiction. We have meetings with each one of the departments during this time. And then on July 1, the property appraiser has to give us these certified taxable values. So these are the values that will actually be used when you set the values that will set the millage rate on. Currently, we have had public workshops. We had public workshops on the 19th, the 20th, and the 21st here at City Council at a public meeting. The proposed budget was submitted to City Council after those workshops. The proposed millage rate and proposed budget was set on July 21st at 7 o'clock here at City Hall. We had a first public hearing on September the 8th at 5:15. At that time, we set the tentative millage and the tentative budget. Tonight, we are in the final public hearing. This is the final meeting that is required. And tonight, we must set the final millage rate and the final budget for the new fiscal year that will begin on October 1st, 2021. The public hearing for tonight by statute is required to be advertised. It was advertised in the Orlando Sentinel on Sunday. So we have met all the requirements, all the advertising requirements are met. So some of the highlights in this budget, as you know, from the last meeting, there have been no changes from the last meeting, from your direction, from your adoption of the last meeting. The millage rate currently sits at 4.1876, which is a decrease of 1/10 of a mil, or represents about $400,000. The tax base for the city has increased $397 million, providing an additional $1.1 million in ad valorem revenues. The utility service tax or public service tax and sometimes you'll see it as municipal service tax. If you recall, we made a change. We had to make a change based on statute to our utility service tax and how it's calculated. It used to be capped. It can no longer be capped, so we've opened that. We've had to make that change. That provides an additional $1.1 million. The general fund tonight that you'll see is we use almost $1.4 million of reserves. Again, some of these dollars, and most of these dollars were held over from FY20 due to the pandemic. There are 16 new positions funded in this budget, and there's one eliminated position. Some of the highlights, more highlights, there's a performance-based merit pay up to 6%. If you recall, last year, the current year we sit in today, that percentage was reduced down to 3% due to a lot of the revenue issues and shortfalls that we faced in that budget year. But this budget does include that merit back up to 6%. The property, casualty, and workers' comp insurance have increased approximately 11%. Health insurance, we've seen an increase of about 6.4%. Camp Weewah, as you know, recently purchased. It is included in this budget in the Parks and Recreation Department, and it has its own separate cost center. Some other highlights are street improvements. Lots of street improvements in this budget. There are, I think, 4 new traffic signals or signals and improvements. There are new sidewalks. As you know, we have a school coming in. So there are new sidewalks. There are sidewalk repairs. There's dollars for sidewalk repairs. Our contract mowing has been very successful. That continues in this budget. The speed hump program is also funded in this budget. There are lots of lighting improvements. Street sweeping program, we continue our street sweeping program. And then there are lots of stormwater improvements. There are a lot of water, wastewater, and reclaimed water infrastructure improvements. Most of them in the Kelly Park area, because you know that is one of the areas where we have seen a lot of growth. And so there are lots of improvements up there for water, wastewater, and reclaimed water lines. Your sanitation fund includes a 3% increase for residential and commercial service beginning on October 1. Positions. So if you recall, I said there were 16 new positions and 1 eliminated position. So there are 2 communication technician positions included, a new code enforcement position, officer position, a records clerk in the city clerk's department or division. There's a multi-code inspector and a permit clerk. Both of those will work in the building department. There's a sanitation equipment operator, an electrician. There is a Camp Weewah manager, an outdoor recreation specialist, and a maintenance worker 2. Those three positions are funded to help fund and run the Camp Weewah. There are 2 recreation leaders, 3 parks workers, and then 1 accounting specialist position has been eliminated. The parks workers if you recall, we used to have an inmate program. We no longer have the inmate program. So those park workers, we've eliminated the inmate program and added parks workers for our parks and grounds. Infrastructure improvements, these are the very big projects, high dollar projects. You have the Harmon Road extension and the traffic signal. This is also where Station 6 will be built. You have Kelly Park Road and Jason Dwelly Parkway, new traffic signal in that area. That is where in the area where the school is coming. You have the design and the traffic signal construction for that project. You have Vic and Lester. If you recall, we've done the design for this, so now this is the construction portion of that traffic light. Errol and 441, there are significant traffic improvements for the signal there. And Bradshaw and 441 also some significant traffic signal improvements. Road resurfacing, if you recall, we took an additional $1 million. We took additional $1 million from our rescue monies and put into our street resurfacing program. It's an area where we've struggled in gas tax, so we have supplemented that with some of those dollars so that we can have more money for our road resurfacing. New sidewalk funding, again, I talked about this. There's new sidewalk funding. One particular area is the new school. There will be some sidewalks that will be needed around the new school. Stormwater pipelining funding, that is included. You have the South Road extension of the Northwest Recreation Complex. There's funding for the design and construction of the South Road for another access coming out of the recreation complex. Grossenbacher water plant, well replacement and rehabilitation. It's a big water project. Playground for Camp Weewa, there's funding in there for that. There's recreation field equipment and mowers included in here. Several vehicle replacements across the departments. Tractor, there's a tractor with an arm so that we can get into those stormwater areas. It's hard sometimes to mow in those stormwater areas because it's wet and we can't get our mowers down in there. Well, this is a tractor that will allow us to mow those areas without having to get down into those wet areas. And then there's a new automated side load garbage truck. Grant applications that are outstanding. You have 10 new police officer positions that we're waiting to hear from the grant. You have police officer body cameras. We've applied for a grant for that. You've got 6 firefighter positions that we've applied for a grant. You've got a fume event system for the 5 fire stations that we've applied for. And then you have a fire safety educational trailer that we've also applied for. We have not heard anything yet. I was hoping we'd have some information for you today, but we have not. I know some jurisdictions are starting to hear. You'll see that some of them are starting to hear about their grant applications. So as soon as we hear something, we'll bring that forward. So items that were excluded in your FY21 budget. As you know, Fire Station 6 was not included last year. It is in this year's budget. The Fire District Chief, those are 3 of the positions that we've asked for, applied for in the grant. Police officers, as you know, we've applied for 10 police officers. The audio video city council and the city council chambers, as you know, that's funded. That process has begun, or we've awarded that contract. So you'll see those improvements begin. Computer servers, IT was able to take care of that through some savings in their current year budget, so they're able to take care of those. Additional fields for Northwest Recreation Complex. As you know, we have a consultant currently that is going through that process through our survey that we did with our citizens to come up with, to bring back to us those improvements. The amphitheater bathrooms, currently you funded some of that with your Duke Energy dollars, and you should see we've signed the agreement with that company, so you should see that construction taking place really soon. Storage building for recreation in the cemetery, you funded that through your Duke Energy dollars, and so that is funded. A new building for Fleet and Streets Division, as you know, there's money in the budget to design that, so we're going to study and design that this year so that we can figure out exactly what do we need, what size of building do we need, so that we can make sure that we meet everybody's needs. City Hall and Public Services fiber replacement, we have not funded that in this budget. We are looking at grant opportunities for that, so we're hoping we can get some grant money for the fiber replacement.
So when you say City Hall and Public Services fiber replacement, what is that?
Fiber optics.
Oh, okay. And what is that for, like Wi-Fi, telephone?
To provide
So
fiber.
we're not replacing former fiber with new fiber, we're upgrading to fiber is what you're saying.
Correct, we like to put new fiber to these areas. We do have some fiber that I think we could do some upgrades to. I mean,
Robert Hippler, IT Department. So the fiber that runs down to public services is a direct bury. There is no marker for us to find it, and it's usually found with public services and a backhoe. It's been cut many times, and we are actually out of additional strands on that fiber. So the idea is to get at least a 24-count fiber down there to future-proof that area. City Hall itself has again, an older fiber that we're out of additional connections if we need it, and it's kind of looped from the city clerk's office over to the ComDev side, because we have 2 different network locations in this building. So we're actually going to bring additional fiber in, which will help for the AV upgrade in here as well, because we're going to need some connections back to the servers, pretty high-speed transport. So that's what those are for.
So what we're saying is we didn't fund it at all?
It's not in this year, no. The City Hall fiber, we can actually replace that in-house, do it ourselves fairly cheap. The public services will be the cost of it, just for the bore portion of it. We actually have a path to get from our data center to over here for the City Hall portion of it, but for the public services, that'll be a costly adventure unless we use our additional manpower here at public services.
It sounds important.
Well, it works until it doesn't, and again, we're out of strands to get down there, and it's been cut many times, and, you know, at some point, you'll see a performance degradation in the actual fiber itself going down there. We'll start to have issues with it. So it needs
So
to happen.
why was it excluded and what's the cost?
We're looking at
to
some of the
include?
grants for it. There's some grants out there for additional infrastructure on this, and we're hoping a grant's going to cover that. If not, then we're going to shoot for it again for next year.
Okay. What is the cost if we were to include it? That's the, because
So-
it was excluded, so what is the cost?
The going rate, if we subcontract that out, per mile is about $160,000 per mile. We're roughly, I'd have to go back and look at our distance. I think we're about 1.75 miles down as the crow flies down to public services. So we're roughly sitting somewhere about $250,000 to get that accomplished. And that's if we were to subcontract that out to somebody. And again, if that could be something done internally here with the manpower, you know, we have the machinery to do so, we would certainly save a lot on that. The fiber itself is not an expensive cost. That's not a huge expenditure. It's the actual putting in ground, getting the conduit, the right-of-way for under the railroad tracks, under the roadways and everything else.
So at the American Rescue, the money that we got, I remember it said broadband. Would that be part of the broadband, replacing that fiber? Would that be considered under that umbrella?
It's pretty touchy. It's not very clear on that, Commissioner. We're trying to get information. I will tell you, I'm trying to get a lot of information together so I can bring that back to you. So this is one of those items that we think may qualify for that. It's, when you talk broadband, it talks about providing service to citizens through the broadband, not with our own infrastructure within the city. So it's very clear to that. But there have been some things there. I've seen some language where we may be able to use those dollars for some other things. There are some specific grants related to this kind of infrastructure, these kind of improvements. So we're trying to see if we can qualify for that first. And then if we don't qualify for that, then we'll come back. And keep in mind too, that the utility fund, a lot of this would be funded from the utility fund. And so some of this would be funded through the utility fund. And so if we don't get the grant and we can't use the rescue monies, then we would use the reserves from the utility fund for this project.
I do remember you saying we had a very healthy utility fund.
You have a very healthy utility.
So
All of
why
your
isn't
funds
it
are healthy.
funded then?
Because we're trying to see if we can get the grant. We'd like
Was the
to.
grant written already?
We're trying to exhaust all of the grant. That's this is one of the grants that we're working with our lobbyist, as you know. We hired the lobbyist on to, and again, there's some infrastructure bills that are still taking place, still negotiations going on in federal government. We're waiting to get that back so that we can see what actually we will qualify for.
So the grant for this is being written by our lobbyists?
No,
They have to find it, they'll find
They have to
where it is, and
where it
then
fits.
we have to write it.
right,
So they haven't, so they're looking for the grant?
correct. We have some items, that's one of them, that they say we might qualify for, or there may be some funding for that, and so we want to see if we can get that funding.
So when do they come back to us to tell us whether we qualify or don't qualify?
When the federal government figures out exactly what that package is going to look like.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the bill
'Cause
hadn't even
It
gotten.
hasn't, it
Yeah,
hasn't.
it's still in process. so
They're
it's
still
not
working,
been-
both sides are
yeah.
still working that infrastructure bill. So, and there may be some new things that come out of that as well that we're going to be looking at and trying. That's why I have our lobbyists to help us. You know, if there's anything else we can qualify that we've got on our list, because we've given them our CIP plan, we've given them all of our big items that we want to see if we qualify for grant opportunities. And so we'll see what we get out of those. And then if we don't get some of those, and these items are items that we need to ramp up and do earlier, then we will come back and present them to you.
Okay.
Street resurfacing, I talked about that. That was one of the issues that we've used some of those rescue dollars for that. Border Lake flooding, this is another one of those where we've applied for a grant. We've applied for, if you recall in the first meeting I talked about, we applied for a mitigation grant to be able to put a pipeline in from that Border Lake area and those other lakes in that area to get that water down to our Cleveland Street facility and treat that water and use it for irrigation purposes.
And that's another grant.
And that's a big grant. That's a big grant. I think this one was about a $5 million project.
So is that grant written, or we're still writing?
This grant, we have to file Friday, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Friday, this grant will be filed.
Will be sent in, and then when do they determine who's awarded those grants?
You know
What's
what?
the time frame in the grant for it?
I don't
Is it
know.
90 days, 180 days?
I don't know. I can get that information for you, though. So I can get you that information.
Because Border Lake is a problem.
Right. No, it's been an issue, an ongoing issue that we're trying to work with. You're right. It's an expensive project. And I know we're looking at, we've got our partners we've worked with. We've earmarked some money here at the city. We've done our share trying to put some, if you recall, we earmarked $250,000 from our Duke Energy dollars. And so, but the grant that we've applied for this speaks to this kind of a project. These are the kinds of projects that it likes. So we're hoping that this will be one of those that we will get.
Okay. So would you let me know?
I'll get you the-
Submitting the grant Friday.
It has to submit, we have to submit
Just
Friday.
What's the time frame before they start awarding?
Yes.
That's important.
We'll see, we'll get you that information.
Thank you.
So an overview of the budget. So like I said, I'm not going to go through the whole thing this evening unless you have questions or you want something highlighted. But as you can see, the overall budget, the revenues for this fiscal year are just over $130 million. The budget is balanced at $130 million from the revenue side. So where do those dollars, where do they come from? As you can see, property taxes represent 13%. Other taxes, which are your, municipal service tax, those types of dollars represent almost 7%. Permits and fees, special assessments represent about 5.5%. Intergovernmental revenues, those are your sales tax dollars and dollars that come from other governments, mainly from the state, represent 9%. Charges for services, about 25%. These are your charges for your water, sewer, recreation. Those are charges for services. Ambulance transports, those are all charges for services. And then you can see the other sections, the other revenues and where they come from. Again, reserves represent almost 21%. And if you recall from the first public hearing, we're using the reserve number is higher than it was last year, but we're using a lot of the impact fee monies that we've collected for those big infrastructure capital projects that we have in this current budget. So by fund, those revenues by fund, you can see the general fund is 45% of the overall city revenue. Utility impact fees are 14%. Utility operations, that is the operating, that's your water, sewer, reclaimed water operating fund, is 20%. Streets improvement represents about 4%, and you can see all the other funds and their percentages in total revenue for the city. On the expenditure side, you can see, again, the budget is balanced, required by state statute that it be balanced. It's balanced at $130 million, which is about 22.8% increase over last year's budget. You can see that these are all the different summary of expenditure by type. From personnel, you can see personnel services, operating, capital outlay, debt service, transfers. The transfers number is up. Again, we're transferring money from the rescue, the grant money that we put, the rescue money that we put in our grant fund to specifically earmark that. We're transferring $1 million of that into the streets fund for road resurfacing. So that's where your transfer numbers is bigger this year. And then on the bottom, you can see by function, you can see that general government is about $8 million. And as you can go down, you can see as you move through all the different ones, public safety is 36, almost $37 million. So from the expenditure side, by type, this is the picture or the graphic of those dollars. You can see that 38% of it is personnel, so 38% of the budget goes to personnel services, 21% go to operating expenses, 28% go to capital outlay. Debt service represents about 5.4. Transfers represent about 7, a little over 7%. By function, you can see here public safety represents 28%, and transportation represents about 10% of the overall expenditures. The utility system represents a little more than 25% of the budget, and then sanitation's about 4%. So you can see the different functions and what piece of the pie they have. On the general fund side, general fund revenues, these are the taxes. Overall, almost a 13% increase. Again, the significant increase here is the utility service tax, public service tax. You can see that the big increase there is due to the change in the actual rate. Licenses and permits, this is your building side, so you have an increase here in your building permit fees from the licenses and permits. Intergovernmental.
Let me just ask you, with the permit fees, are we on line with other cities? I mean, do other cities, were they charging kind of similar, the same fees, or are we the lowest in the fees?
No, I think from what Jim and his group are working, we're going to bring you a presentation on that to show you how those fees compare with other fees. So you'll see that as we come forward in the future. Keep in mind, these fees have to be used for that building department, so that's what they're going to bring that back to you, trying to get their software installed. And once they get their software installed, they can bring you back those reports and bring you back that information. So that's one of the items that we're going to bring back to you, so you can see how we compare to those. Keep in mind, it's not so much how you compare to other jurisdictions. Are those dollars covering the cost of your building department? That's what's critical in that. Those lines.
Why would that be predicated on software being implemented to see a fee schedule?
Because we want to be able to see these dollars. If you notice, we've added a multi-code inspector, we've added a permit clerk. So we want to be able to see, are the revenues coming in covering the cost to provide that service? And so we want to be able to have the software in so we can actually give you, so you can see how many inspections we've done, who's doing the inspections, how much, what the workload is, because we don't have that software to give you that number. And so we want to be able to give you that number, because currently our software, we don't track that. It's all done manually, and we don't have a good system to track those numbers.
But on a per permit basis, like simple costs.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, you can do that.
I think that's where Commissioner Velasquez was going.
And we can do that, but I think you're also concerned, you want to know how we compare to other jurisdictions. And so I think you have to be, well, when we bring all that, you'll be able to see all that. But I think you have to be careful. It's not just on those fees, it's not just so much what somebody else is charging, it's are they in line with covering the cost of your building department?
Okay.
They're specifically related to the building department, those fees. The intergovernmental revenue, this is your state revenue sharing dollars. As you can see, there's 8% in the state revenue sharing and almost 7.5% in the half-cent sales tax. So these are the numbers that the state has given us. So we'll continue to monitor these. Again, an overall 7% increase in this revenue source. Charges for services are up 30%. This is mainly due to adding Camp Weewa, because we will have a whole new revenue to offset those expenditures in the Camp Weewa. Fines and forfeitures are relatively flat. Miscellaneous revenue is down, and you can see that investment income is down a little bit based on the economy. Non-operating revenues, these are all your reserves and your transfers. Again, the biggest increase here is using the reserves. We're using almost $1.4 million of the reserves to help balance this budget. On the expenditure side of the general fund, total general government is only up about 1%, a little over 1%, not much change in total general government. Public safety in total overall is up about 11%, a little over 11% in total public safety. So looking at overall, fire's up 9.3 and police is up 12.7. Community development is up about 8%. Again, this is your building, 2 new building positions that are included in here. Public services, facilities, almost $1 million increase in facilities. So we put a lot of money into our facilities. This is the air conditioners, this is the building maintenance, repair, fire alarms. This is where all of this, we have lots of dollars in those facilities maintenance. Parks and recreation, overall, this increase, $1 million of this increase, as you can see, is due to Camp Weewa. It has its own line, and it has the revenue that offsets that line. Debt service is down. You can see $679,000 as we continue to pay that debt down. That relieves more dollars that can be spent in other places. And then transfers is up $445,000, and that, if you recall, is because we took $400,000 from the general fund that was from our franchise agreement with Duke Energy that had to be spent on lights, and we put that into the streets fund so that we can do those lighting improvements that we have all been talking about. So you can see overall that the general fund budget is balanced at a little over $58.5 million, or almost 12% more than last year. So where do the revenues come into the general fund? Almost 41% of it comes from taxes. Licenses and permits, 12%. Intergovernmental revenues represent almost 20%. Charges for services, 7%. And then transfers, 12.2%, 12.3%. Transfers from other funds. Expenditure side, public safety represents 59% of the total general fund expenditure. Recreation represents 11.5%. Administration is 11.6%. And then you can see community development represents about 4.6%. So you can see where those dollars go to on the expenditure side. And with that, like I said, tonight you have to set the final millage rate, you have to set a final budget, and we have to notify the Department of Revenue, the property appraiser, and the tax collector of within 3 days of what those numbers will be. So I'm here to answer any questions. The staff is here to answer any questions you may have. Again, everything has been published, everything has been noticed, so all requirements have been met from the trim process.
Any questions for Edward on the budget?
I just had a quick presentation to breeze through, if I may. While Rob's pulling that up, so I just took a chance between the two sessions to drive around our city just to kind of look at the general shape of the city of Apopka. And, you know, I'm not trying to place blame on anybody here, but either it's a lack of execution or a lack of funding on some of these things that, you know, if we're saying that this is good enough, we've got to have the conversation. When you're going over the 429, this is something that people pass by every single day. I get that we're storing some trash cans or piping at this location, but it's littered with graffiti. It looks like garbage. It's got standing stagnant water that probably breeds exorbitant amounts of mosquitoes. It's something that not only are you driving past every day on the 429, but on the weekends, this is the entrance to the wildlife drive that's very popular. I think the last count, it's over 50,000 vehicles annually. So it doesn't set a good picture when you're driving through Apopka. This sign is coming up Akoya Apopka Road. It's the City of Apopka sign, but you wouldn't be able to see it because it's got trees blocking it. This is the entryway to our city coming in from South Apopka. As you can see, the medians, rights of ways, not treated, doesn't look like it has been in quite some time. The City of Apopka sign, faded, almost non-readable. This is Cleveland Street over by our wastewater treatment center. If you can't see the striping in the road, your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. I don't need a study to understand that the striping is gone and we need dollars to replace those. This is the entrance to our public services complex. I assume that there used to be pretty plants in that planter, but now it's just a weed bed. The logo for the city of Apopka is completely faded. This is Station Street at 5th. This is where we're trying to attract developers to come in and build a public-private partnership downtown development. This is what they see. This is our property. The picture doesn't do it justice. If I was standing in that weed bed towards the back, you probably wouldn't be able to see my head. This is our property. How can we go out to our residents and code enforce if we can't maintain our own? Again, Station Street. Grass, weeds growing in the gutter. Not maintained. On Station. This is the VFW Community Center. Doesn't look like the hedges have been trimmed in several weeks. The grass, if you want to call it that, is mostly weeds. This is one of our premier meeting locations. Now, granted, this isn't our responsibility. The developer's agreement dictates that the developer of this property maintains this fountain. But this is the brand new fountain. Half of it is landscaped, if you want to call it that. The other half is not. This is Cleveland Street as well. Private neighborhoods, city of Apopka that surround this. This is what they drive home to. This is our median out in front of City Hall. Granted, it looks like ornamental peanut were planted to be the ground cover, but if you can see, it's overridden with weeds, high grasses, and it doesn't look like it's been mowed in a couple weeks. This is the Apopka Little League field, or the old Apopka Little League field. We have no money in the budget to do anything with this piece of property. If you'll notice in the background, it looks like it's a storage location for tires. This is Sandpiper in Park Avenue. I highlight this particular location because the crosswalk has almost completely disappeared, as well as the stop sign line where motorists should stop for the safety of pedestrians. This is a critical crosswalk because this is the primary trail system going northbound, southbound on Park Avenue, almost completely gone. And I use this to highlight this is indicative of many, many different crosswalk locations within the city of Apopka. This is shameful. This is our premier park in the city of Apopka. And this is how people that are both residents and visitors alike see our recreation complex. This is the front of the sign. This is the back of the sign. This was taken yesterday. This is property where we want to build new fields. There's no budget in this budget to do anything on this piece of property. This is a disabled parking sign right by the Parks and Rec's main office. When are we replacing this? This is interesting because out of all the grass that were cut, all of these little peninsulas all across this parking lot, this piece of grass was not cut. This is what the primary parking, when you go into the amphitheater, that median looks like. Completely weed-ridden. We have hundreds of families that participate in youth soccer and other sports at the Parks and Recs facility. And I guess they're expert parkers because the lines are almost completely disappeared from this parking lot. This is a pavilion, the parking area by that pavilion. The pavilion was not maintained. You've got weeds almost overtaking the parking lot in that location. The handicap signs, apparently weed eating was not the focus for this day. We've got potholes, we've got disappearing lines again. It's a safety issue. This is the weeds overtaking the curb. Stop sign almost faded. All of our Apopka amphitheater signs look something similar to this. Cracked, old, outdated. This is just an hour-and-a-half trip around the city. And yet we're talking about giving back $400,000 to $500,000 worth of tax revenues that can go to make our city what residents would expect and welcoming for those people that come to our city. This is Leicester Road. You can see on the right-hand side, the bike path indicator is almost completely vanished. This picture, actually, I lucked out because this is probably the only stretch that actually has reflectors still on the roadway. This is a non-lit road, but you have a lot of bicyclists and pedestrian traffic that go on here. At night, it's almost, you can't see it. This is Shopkey Lester and Lester Road at the intersection of Arbor Ridge. We just put in 2 new stop signs, but again, the indicators of the intersection are almost completely vanished at this point. Another thing that we could use to help message our events, we have these things all throughout our city. If you notice in the picture hanging from the light post, prongs to put banners. We have them here in the City Hall parking lot. We have them all the way up 441, on Park Avenue, and other locations within the city. Maybe twice a year they're utilized. The rest of the time, they look like this. What's the one thing that residents or people that don't know about concerts at the amphitheater talk about? Well, I didn't know anything about it. Everybody drives through here. Why are we not investing money on these things? And last but not least, we talked about it, rightfully so, at the last hearing, talking about proper staffing on apparatus. This is our tower truck, 100-foot rig. 2 people drive this. 2 people respond to calls on this apparatus. I mean, these are critical needs. And before we say that, oh, we've got this stuff budgeted for 2022 on some of this landscaping and the striping stuff, we carried over almost $400,000 or $450,000 in the streets fund into this budget year because we didn't do these things the last budget year. So it doesn't give me much confidence that it's going to happen next year. We can't sit here and say that we're benefiting taxpayers by reducing our millage rate when we're not tackling these most basic of things for our city to make it look attractive for our residents. With that, I close.
Any other questions?
Well, this is an interesting observation. And if we sit here silent and not address it, I think it's an injustice to our public who is tuning in, and certainly to those who have made the effort to be here. So I feel that we should address this.
Well, I'm going to say it that I believe 80% of these things that we just saw is not actually a funding issue. I think it's just that the people that are employed need to get it done. I think the funding is already there. We have the personnel to do it. Why it's not done, I'm not sure. I think 80% of them are things that can be done with current funding. I'm not sure who else goes and rides around that's city employees to look at these things and see things that needs to be done or that are not being done. Just like I talked about the sidewalks that need to be pressure washed. And then yesterday I was riding again, and not only are the ones along 441 that look bad and need to be pressure washed, but there's some down Park Avenue, down Cleveland, also need to be pressure washed. And so I don't think it's all about the funding. We just need to tighten our belts and make sure the people that are responsible for these things being done, that they get done.
Yeah, I would say this would have been a great presentation at the beginning of our budgeting process to look at that and see why isn't it getting done. As we've talked about, we did put more funding to make sure that we have, what I called curb appeal, because that does affect our development and things like that. Do you have any estimate on the whole of the things that you showed there of what it would have cost to have gotten that done? And those are things I would have liked to have looked at when we had all of the extra funding coming in for the rescue funds, that we could have said, prioritize, wait a minute, these things haven't been done. I thought some of these were funded as far as, more money for making sure that our mowing, those different things. I know some cases where I brought it to the city's attention, it was because of the transition between the prisoner program that we had used to our own people, that it wasn't on the list. As soon as it was on the list, it's been done ever since. So I don't know if some of that, as Commissioner Smith said, is just we haven't overseen that in the best way that we can. Again, I don't want to speak against any, I don't have any answer for that because it's just presented, but I would like to know if there are things that are funded, as Commissioner Smith said. I believe there is funding, we just need to be more diligent in that. And again, there's some of the other issue that we've discussed. We've done an incredible amount in 2 back-to-back very difficult years. So if we were doing nothing and not moving forward, we did raise those funds, but where do we draw that line? We can always say, had we done more, we could have done more with it. Or we can go back and say, well, wait a minute, if these were issues, why didn't we address them when we were going through the budgeting process? So it's, very, very important, picture tells a great story there, but I wish we could have maybe done this at the beginning of that process, and we might have approached it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, I've presented pictures like that in this chambers before, right? The same thing at the Parks and Recs location. I did it either last budget workshop or sometime within the last budget workshop to this one, because there was pictures of the weed bed next to the front sign off of Poncan Road, how the trees weren't being edged around the base of those trees next to the Pop Warner field. So I've brought it up in the past.
And then didn't we push for some increased funding there? So
Yeah,
that's why
but
I
it
thought
just
was
hasn't come
being
to
addressed.
fruition, is what I'm saying.
We've got a new sign going in at Poncan. And we've got a new sign going in at Kitland Nelson Park. I mean, some of these things it's great to grandstand in front of the city council about things that, our parks and recs or our streets would take care of. As far as the streets go, we've got the survey coming in to look at which roads need to be replaced or fixed. We also, before school, we got with Pam and with Paul, and we had made sure that all of the crosswalks at the schools were repainted. Now, it's probably maybe only a year, 2 years, depending on where they are in the cycle of repaving, but I wanted to make sure that the schools had proper striping for the kids to go across at those crosswalks. So we have made a lot of progress, and I think if you drive around and you go from Orange County to the city of Apopka on the major thoroughfares, I would venture to say that ours look better across the board. And I think our landscape guy has, he's struggled this year, not for lack of trying, but he's had a hard time getting, the people that he needs. But I can tell you, I've seen him out there Saturday and Sunday mowing 441 and 436, making sure that, he tries to keep up with what we've requested. But, we've made a lot of progress. I mean, you see City Hall, we're about ready to get this all re-landscaped. So things are coming around, and it just, a lot of these things are, you could have emailed Edward and gotten a response on some of these small fixes that are a part of our budget. And they were out today trimming trees that were into the Sheila Oaks subdivision because the trees were hitting school buses and whatnot on the top. So.
No, and I appreciate Edward. I purposely didn't include sidewalks in this one because every time I send a sidewalk repair, it's quickly done, and I appreciate that. I don't view this as grandstanding. I think these are all critical needs. And again, I've presented stuff like this in city council chambers before. I've also emailed as residents put their request forward. What I'm saying is that if we think this is an execution issue, okay, fine, let's manage through that. If we're saying, but me as a layperson outside looking in from where I sit as a commissioner, I have to assume if these basic things aren't getting done, it has to be funding, resource capacity, and other things that aren't necessarily directly related to execution. And if it's a funding mechanism, and again, that's what I have to believe, then we should be providing those departments with the proper and adequate funding to get the job done properly. I will not ever say that I'm grandstanding when it comes to properly staffing our fire department. And again, we heard that Houston was the model the last meeting. Since then, I've had several people bring to attention that Houston does use a 3 or maybe even 4-person engine staffing model. So, if we want to say that we're trying to get past the Houston model, I fully agree, and I think we should get there. I disagree with the idea that just because we have something formally in the budget, that we compromise our ability to get grants, because I think the staffing levels for both the police and fire have come to the idea that we need more than what we're applying for the grants with. So I appreciate your opinion, I just disagree with it.
I did want to bring
so-
something up.
I mean, so we do have this, and he is right about the 429, that house. It is an eyesore, and it is, first of all, for me, has been the signage, and I'm hoping we can get to that point where we can have a sign that when you come off 51 that says, "Welcome to Apopka." And there is no sign there, but when we are driving on the 429, which I do use it often, that house always catches my attention. And that is part of Apopka, and we should have done something with that house years ago, and somehow we should find, either paint it or do something so that it looks okay, or either demolish it. Those are the only two choices you have with that. You know, and striping. I know that you had done the schools, but it is important. There are some intersections that we do need the striping because we do have pedestrians using those crosswalks. And those are some of the things, like, maybe we should put on a list. We don't need the streets assessments to tell us to do it. We should be doing it. I mean, there's some solutions that we can do. We all drive around the city and we all see different things. You know, and I know I come to you all the time with signs or trees or let's do something. But maybe we should also kind of have our own staff. This tells me, seeing this, we don't have enough personnel to really deal with to try and fix all these problems. We're always just kind of putting a Band-Aid on something. If someone contacts us, then we tell you it gets done. But there's nothing there to say, you know, if our staff that's driving around and they're doing the streets, if they see something, maybe we should have some kind of incentive for them that if they see something to kind of initiate, to come back and say, you know what, we were working on this street and, you know, the right-of-way hasn't been mowed, the sign is so faded, that we need to do something to encourage even the staff that's out in the field. I don't have an answer, but we all drive around and we do see things. But the house, now that he brought it up, it is an eyesore, and that's something I think we should do something about sooner than later, because it's been like that for years. And we're Marshall Lake, they're building an entire new development there. The homes look beautiful, but you always have to see that dilapidated house on the highway there. So that's one of the things I'd like to see done. And how much did we pay for that engine, the taxpayers? How much did we pay for that?
That was $1 million plus. It was over $1 million.
Over $1 million.
Over $1 million.
Is it wrong for the firemen to say, the firefighters, to say it needs to be staffed with 4, 3 is the minimum, we put 2. We're putting 2 firefighters on a truck that we paid for over $1 million.
Well, and Commissioner, I think, you know, that the fire chief would speak better to that.
He did.
I think, you know, and he laid the plan out and he has his future plans. Like I said, we've applied for some grant opportunities. We're hoping we're gonna, you know, see some movement there. But you know, we've done, I think, you know, we have a great fire department.
We do.
And the safety of our fire is very, very important, and we've
And I
addressed
did,
that.
and so I
we
want to
continue to
kind of
address
say
that.
that I had a conversation with your chief yesterday, and I did say that to him. I did say, I don't want to keep beating him up, but I wanted from him some kind of commitment that he will at least address the one important thing that the firefighters have been wanting, was to secure a 3-man, and that's the minimum, of 3 men on this apparatus. And I'm glad that we're seeing what it is and what we paid for it, because it should be staffed by 3.
Well, Commissioner, I mean, I understand, that's the union, firefighters union, and that's what they're asking for.
That's not the union. It's not the union.
Well, let me ask you this. So we've had 4 fire chiefs since we got our ISO rating in 2004. So in 2004, 17 years ago, we've run the same kind of a program with the squads. So under Chief Anderson, Chief Bronson, Chief Carnesali, and Chief Wylam, we've always had a 2-man squad and a 2-man fire truck apparatus. So now all of a sudden, 17 years later, now it's important that we go to 3. I don't know what's changed.
Did we have, well, let me ask the chief fireman. I didn't ask him that. So you're telling me we've always had a 2-man on this apparatus?
Yeah, but the thing is the staffing levels, right now, based off our last hearing, the staffing level is at 29 citywide at any given time. I don't necessarily think that staffing levels were below that number in years past. Now, granted, the model hasn't changed, but at least for me personally, we had always gotten in this idea of ISO, until recently, and quite honestly, it's not because of the union, but it's the material that came as a result that we were all copied on, where you articulate what that means in terms of staffing on an engine apparatus and overall in the city. Again, based off of the national standards for firefighters, where it's 15-person minimum on these calls. That's why I was saying in the last hearing, you can only respond to 1 structure fire in the city at a time when you only staff at 29. And so it's a combination of things. It's 2 or 3 main topics that at the end of the day, with the information that I have now currently at hand, it makes sense to do the staffing model that we're sitting up, or at least I'm sitting up here trying to advocate for. But I'll let you explain.
Yeah, so
Well, before you say that, it's my understanding from your presentation you gave before, is that you agree that we need to have 3 per engine. It's your methodology of how we get there. And you said that you want to make sure it's done correctly. And so I'm standing firm on the fact that if we don't receive the grant, that we're going to fund those 6 that you're requesting now from the reserve. 3, you said, are fire district chiefs and 3 firefighters, and then we're moving in that direction. You said you want to do it in the right way. It's my understanding.
Yes, sir. So to answer the first question, we've always had 2 people assigned to this apparatus. Before, actually, we had 2 that were assigned in kind of the same way on the heavy rescue, ambulance 11, and tower 1. So when I first started, that was the manning for that. It was a cross manning. One of the first things, and if you remember, that when I took over, is I augmented manpower from Station 5 and 6 and put them at Station 1, so we could put an officer on this unit. Assigning of the right personnel is vitally important. I get that. So we've always had 2 people assigned to it. It's just, nothing's changed as far as, to answer your question, as that goes. What we want to establish now, and my priority this year, I asked for it last year, because one of the things that was left out last year is a district chief. Okay, that's a safety-related issue. That's my priority this year, to get that established. We need supervision. We need the span of control. We have 7 lieutenants right now. We have 6 engines and 1 tower truck. That's 7 lieutenants per shift. Right now, we have 1 district chief who supervises all those people. Not only that, if we do respond to multiple calls, we want those district chiefs to be able to disperse. We want a safety officer. One of the things that when I looked at this week as well, we're handling our call volume. We're able to, we respond, we have a contract with the county that we run 29's area as well. We also have a contract in place that we assist them whenever they call us. We responded 175 to 190 times in the last 2 years to assist Orange County. How many times do we ask them to assist us? 0. We checked that last week. We're handling our call volume and more. I can tell you right now, we have a phenomenal department. I'm not just saying that. 0.8% in the country, ISO 1, and I know that sometimes that is the litmus test. Putting in for these grants is the litmus test, in my opinion. We've applied for them for multiple years. What I'm trying to apply for, because last time we put in for 18, and I contacted the FEMA rep after we applied for the grant, that's the one who steered me towards these NFPA studies. Everything I present to you guys is guidance from them to see how we can get to where we need to go. The squad systems are in place. They've worked for years, for 20 years. Again, are we gonna grow? Absolutely. Are we gonna increase our manpower when it's necessary? Absolutely. But I can tell you right now, we have a bang-up department. I mean, I don't know how else to say that.
So you're telling me under the mutual service agreement with Orange County, they've asked you to come out and help them respond 175 to 190 times, and you said we've asked them how many times? Zero?
Zero.
So
Yes.
0 times we've helped them.
No, they've.
They've helped us. 175 to 190 the last 2 years, we've helped them.
And that's outside the contract. That's not even, that's not including 29's contract area. That's a normal run
right.
for us now, because that's our contract area. Again, things we look at, I get it, we're growing. We all want to, same as Chief McKinley, we want to make sure we're moving in that direction. But what my priorities now, you want to talk about safety, let's talk about safety, as a district chief and starting to move that direction. Absolutely.
I just feel like the line of discussion up here, there's some sort of question that it's incorrect thinking to try and get to this 3-person staffing on this apparatus, but I'll go back to our budget workshop where I made the comment, if money was not an object, would that be the staffing model that you would pursue? And the answer was in the affirmative. So it's not like I'm fabricating this idea of going to that model because I think you're in agreement that we should be going to that model. So I'm just using your acknowledgement during the budget workshops.
Yeah, and as we increase our, when you look at, when you ask, can we handle more than one fire call at once? Well, we're not in Orlando yet. We're getting there. We're more the COE sizes right now that we talked about the last council meeting, how we're 3,000 or 4,000 less than them. And that affects how much money we get from, we're more than that. And Ocoee right now cannot handle more than one fire on their own without the help of the aid of the county. That's why those agreements are in place. That's where things are in place and how that all works. It's a mutual aid thing, but we are handling, we proved it by showing what we run on a daily basis and how many times we're assisting them. They signed a contract with us to help them, on.
Just to bring a little perspective for me, just in the tenure that I've been here, I believe it was 3 or 4 years ago, I don't remember, but we
Right.
added 28 firefighters
27,
at that
yes, sir.
time.
Yeah.
And we did go after the truck. We were beginning to see higher buildings, bigger buildings. And so we got the tower truck. We began to go that direction. I don't have any issue with our aim changing, our model changing, if the structure of our city is changing, if we, again, the bigger industrial processes, if it takes more to be effective in that, then let's get there. But the issue is we can't do all of that at once. Again, this presentation, I would have changed how we should have spent some of those extra dollars that came in had we seen that, and you have presented that before, and we did increase funding for our mowing, for these. So had I known it wasn't being covered, I would have said, well, let's look at how we approach that. At the same time, let me finish.
Yeah.
At the same time, we've got the needs on one hand, we have the taxpayers on the other hand, we have what we've been through as a whole in a community. We've got to take all these things into consideration. I don't think we have backed off in our support for fire over this time. We've had to simply increase it for our police. We should have been equal all the way along, but we found ourselves behind. We've been making strides to catch up. I was in the understanding that we are moving forward, we are hiring 6 more. That 400,000, I wanted to bring this up earlier, a concern, one of the firefighters sent in a letter and said that, one of the uses that he could see for extra 400,000 would be for mold mitigation at the fire stations. It's an ongoing health issue that we've been trying to get assistance with and get under control for years. That's the first time I had heard that.
Trying to get, out of that realm, that's a real issue. Things you talk about with mold and that's the first I've heard of it.
So my point in this bigger perspective is, okay, our taxpayers. As I said before, we've gone from 3.76, I believe, when I started, to this number. We extended that because some of the things were still an unknown. Back when we set that temporary millage rate. So we pushed higher. Some of those things were resolved. Some numbers came in better. So where do we go? We've got a taxpayer base that has been through some of the two most difficult years. We have restaurants that are closing, businesses that are closing, people that have lost their jobs, people that have not been able to catch up. The insurance rates are skyrocketing right now. The gas, of course, is going up. Food, I saw a study just the other day that in this next several months, we will see food prices increasing. These are practical issues that affect every common person's budget. So again, I'm not trying to argue anyone else. I respect everyone up here. And I want to get to that goal. I'll just say that. I just want to make sure that we're doing it in a wise way that's not strangling the cow that's giving the milk. I also have citizens that are saying, there are those that say, let's raise it because they're in a good position and it's good for them, you know? But there are others on all spectrums of the scale that have said, no, we are getting hit on every side. So for me, it is not against our firefighters. I love our fire department and support them wholeheartedly. So this has been anguish for me to not say, well, let's fund the whole thing. But I am saying we are taking steps. My understanding is we've got 6 there. We have reserved enough funds, so if the grant didn't come through, then we will still fund them. And again, that's one step forward. Let's keep taking steps until we get there. But we just simply had to shift our focus back to our police department. And we can't do both of those all at once, or, you know, if we did raise that millage rate, we could use the exact same arguments for the next level of millage rate. It's a hypothetical that never stops. So again, are there places that we could use those funds? Of course there are. But where do we draw the line? That's the real question. And for me, all those things put together, that was, I felt it was a legitimate budget. And I'll tell you, those pictures are powerful. Let's do something about that. Let's focus on it. But I don't think that's the reason to change this. I think it's a healthy thing. It's a little bit of a breather for our taxpayers to say, hey, we do care about you too. So while we still are trying to accomplish the things they want us to do. It's a challenge.
Yeah, and let me address the comment that you made. Again, what I just presented tonight is pictures. Pictures to words that I've said over and over and over again. So nothing that is in this, with the exception, I'll admit that the polls, the advertising, the banners for the polls, that's the only thing in this presentation that I've never brought up in the past. So,
But we did increase those funds.
And we've got.
but I'm saying is that we have no.
We've got banners coming.
This is a state of affairs that has been. I harken back to last budget workshop a year ago, and there was a comment made on this dais to say no one's going to remember a year from now that the grass was 12 inches too high. So these are issues that I've said repeatedly are at an issue. I mean, I'll again use Lester Road striping as an example. We've said in past years that would be taken care of after, I believe, some of the Vic Road repaving. Oh, well, they'll have extra money to do some striping unless that never happened, never came to fruition. So these things, while we say that we have budget for it, I just don't have proof. And I think it's more prudent to prove that we can get these things done, then lower the millage, versus trusting that things that haven't been getting done will get done. And again, we have to be careful now, because what we're saying is that we've got 6 fire if we don't get grant funding to come from reserve. We've got 10 police if we don't get grant funding that comes from reserve. We've got the venting that will come from reserve if we don't get these grants. We're now treading in the area where we're treating our reserve fund as an operational account, not a rainy day fund, as we've all sat up here and said needs to happen. So we've got a lot of people with hands open wanting reserve balance funds if they don't get the grants that they're offering. $400,000 in tax money, which I think is fair. It keeps the tax rate the same exact that it is today. Hedges our bets if we don't get those grants, and we need to spend on critical spends in our city. Thank you.
When you brought that up last year, I agreed with you, and we did increase for mowing for those different things. So it wasn't ignored, and it was addressed, and we did add to it. So if it's not being executed properly, yes, we should address that. We're right now at the final decision, and again, being presented, yes, you brought those up, but we have responded. So again, if I saw these pictures back when we were doing this at that point and realized, okay, these things are not getting done, then I would have said some of these monies, these extra monies that we brought in, that we put towards other things. Remember, I wanted to pay off our debt, but we decided, well, we need to put it there. So we didn't do that because something was presented. So I would just simply say, again, good job bringing those up. I think we could have found that and still bring the relief and the incremental steps. Again, for me, if we take this, it's not going to solve our problem. We've got to deal with it from the impact funds. New growth needs to be taken care of. It needs to take care of the new impact that it creates. So I think there's ways to do this. We are moving forward. We are making a difference. There are things in place. We can always execute better. We will say that every year that we're here. But I don't think that relief to the taxpayer answers all those things. Again, yes, we could use that much money. We could use that much more on top of that. We can always say that. So let's go back there, if we need to right now, and say, these things that you presented are more important than some of the things that we covered on some of the infrastructure. I love taking care of infrastructure, but if this is more important, then right now, we can sharpen the pencil, say, you know what, some of that money, just like we did with the debt, we didn't pay off all of it. We can say, okay, if that's what we need to do, I'm simply asking, with that presentation, how much is it going to cost to take care of those issues? And is that funding there? If not, then I think we can find it, but we're going to have to say no to something else. But we can still take steps for our fire, which is vital, and for our police, which is vital. And we just have to do it a step at a time. Had we not done a lot of this a few years ago, we need to make those decisions now. But we have taken a big step. And so it was big for fire then. It's big for police while still moving forward. And I do agree. I think the 3 per truck, if that's the standard for where we are changing as a community, then that needs to be a goal, and we can get there. Let's just do it in a way that's not going to, break the back.
And if I remember correctly, last budget cycle, we sent staff back and told them to take the additional funding that we was talking about letting go, to put it into public works so that we could take care of the grass and those things. And so if that didn't do it, then something is wrong and we need to reevaluate. And then when I looked at the $400,000 we were talking about keeping or not keeping, we would only be able to hire 4 firefighters with the $400,000, so we still wouldn't be able to do the 6 that the chief is asking for. And then a couple of residents, they saw some of the rhetoric that people were making about, but it's only going to save them $15. And their comment was, $15 may not sound like a lot to us, because they think we're rich sitting up here, but they say to them that $15 means a whole lot. And even if it's only at tax time, when it's time for them to pay their tax bill, that $15 can make a difference whether they paid it or not. So those $15 mean a lot to them, and they don't want us to make a joke out of the savings that we're talking about.
Okay, I guess we need to open up for public comment. Anybody from the public want to speak on this one? Come on.
Thank you for having me. Mayor Nelson, Commissioners, I'd like to start by reiterating the email that I sent to you all. I love the Apopka Fire Department. Some of the best years of my career have been spent within the walls of Station 1. I've developed lifelong friendships within those walls, as well as the walls of the buildings we fought fires in together. I have extreme confidence in this department's ability to protect my home from the threat of fire. I have this confidence because I know the culture of the Apopka Fire Department and the aggressiveness and selflessness that they have. Firefighters are among the best humans in society. I know because I see it firsthand. I watch firefighters do heroic and impressive things one moment, and then the next show kindness and compassion for the weakest in society. It's an honor to share the same title with these people. The Apopka Fire Department should be supported 150% by the city administration and the fire department's administration. The most important way they can be supported right now is by providing adequate and appropriate staffing. First priority is the units responding to 911 calls. We drop everything when the bell goes off. We give 150% to the public we serve, in the shower, on the toilet, cooking dinner, training. It makes no difference, we go. That is why these men and women should receive the same effort from the support roles in administration. Second priority is ensuring that they have proper equipment, training facilities to accomplish the mission. I will praise the City of Apopka and the Fire Department's administration for providing incredible equipment and a beautiful training facility. It makes a huge difference, and it does not go unnoticed by the surrounding agencies. That said, there are still improvements that can be made. The training division, the EMS division, fire prevention and education all need more personnel. I would even suggest civilian support members for the chiefs in charge of those divisions. The EMS division particularly needs more staff. It is completely unacceptable to expect one man or woman to organize all the training, including state-mandated recertifications, order EMS supplies, keep inventory, disseminate these supplies, quality control review EMS reports to protect from litigation, and attend meetings with medical directors and stay up to date. Fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. That is relevant because not having a firefighter backwards on every engine and tower dressed and ready to go when they arrive is putting victims and firefighters at high risk of death and injury. A firefighter, and I'll add, a firefighter waiting to offload a patient on the wall of the hospital does not count as a third firefighter. It matters that we get the truck in under a minute, get to the truck in under a minute. It matters that the fire station is within a certain mileage of the fire. It matters that firefighters are aggressive in their fire attack and victim search. It matters that every fire suppression unit has at least 3, but ideally 4. It matters that the firefighters show up in gear ready to fight fire without delay. The dice is being rolled too often with the current model. I understand the times we are in, and I'm not out of touch with the struggles that people are going through. We definitely should not be even considering things like buying campgrounds or non-critical expenditures if any part of our public services are in need. Police and fire should be the highest priority. I know that most of you, if not all, desire to accomplish this goal. I pray that you have creative ideas and invest much time in accomplishing them. Please ride along with the firefighters. Please try to understand why the staffing is so important. Do not wait until a firefighter dies or a savable civilian dies to heed all of the warnings. Thank you for your time and effort in addressing these things. I am aware that all of these improvements cannot be made in a day or a single budget year, but 4-man engines and 4-man tower trucks should absolutely be the goal. The infrastructure must be in place if the city is going to continue to grow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else, Susan? Anybody else? Okay. All right, we will close the public hearing. Any last thoughts?
I know that you had said you put in for the firefighters through a grant. Was that through the SAFER grant program? Yes, that's correct. Oh, so that's the one that, yeah, because I saw that they are awarding that. Just one question regarding both police and fire. And I know we put in for 10 for the police department, and I can tell you from back 2014, McKinley had been asking for that, so I'm happy that he is getting that. But besides what we have asked for in the grant, do we have a deficit in the staff right now, in the fire and the police?
Commissioner, the chiefs would need to respond to that for you. I think they would be better to respond to that for you for their sides. I know police he did his presentation. He made that pretty
In other words, if you've had,
Yeah, we've had 2 retirements recently, so
Right.
we have 2 vacancies, but that's not included in the
so
additional 6 we're
you're
asking
still
for.
going, when we get those 6, you're still going to fill
Absolutely.
those positions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We're starting a hiring process, actually. I was working with Joe with HR today on that, too.
Okay,
for new
he's
hires.
shaking his head, so I'm happy with that. What about, is there anybody here from the police? No.
Yeah, McKinley has.
Same thing I was going to
Yeah.
ask was, I know we're getting 10, but I wanted to find out if the positions that he still has open, on top of those 10, will he fill those positions?
Yes, those positions are funded and will be filled.
I think he's what, four down, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, something, it's like 6 or 7, but I know recently they've made some offers, so they're working really hard and trying to fill those positions.
Okay. And what about the directors that we need down at Public Services?
Public Service Director is currently advertised, and Joe through HR is continuing to receive applications, and we're continuing to monitor those and look at those.
And there was another, and the other one from Parks, is it Recreation?
We got facilities.
Positions are open.
No, not that one.
Facilities Administrator.
Facilities.
Phyllis,
That
yeah,
one is currently open as well, and we're receiving applications for that.
okay.
We're starting those in.
So those are all funded?
Those are all funded. All
Okay.
positions are completely funded.
All right.
I just wanted to say thank you, Chris. I appreciated your presentation. I think there's some great ideas. It was going so fast there, I was trying to write some of those down. I think those are some great goals, and any way we can make the best better is great. It should be the goal. It should be the aspiration. Again, these standards, I actually called and spoke with Chris today after receiving his letter, and I appreciate that. And Todd, I appreciated your letter. It helps give that perspective. We appreciate these guys that are here. And it's hard to have to sit here and say, I wish we could give you everything. But if we're not doing anything, that would be an issue. It is our intention and goal to keep moving that direction while trying to balance the whole of the rest. And I hope that you guys know that and know how much we do support you. And so, at that point, again, with the presentation the chief gave, listening to different firefighters, talking with him, our ISO, that's a great number, but I also wanted to make sure that it's effective. And I actually asked the question, is it too low of a standard? Is the ISO 1 too low of a standard? And no, it's a good standard. So if we're meeting that standard, it's good, but that doesn't mean it's answering where we're going. So that made sense to me when I talked with Chris. How we are changing as a city, we may need to change that model, even though it has worked well in the past. And with all the former firefighters, we are changing and we are growing. So, we want to support that and stand with that and continue to move that direction. So I think, again, I'm glad that we're moving forward with the 6. I'm glad we're addressing the directors. And we need to be gearing up for that in the next year as we prepare for these things. So I think we're moving the right direction, and I think we're on a good course.
Mr. Smith?
My only comment is that I heard you say that we have funding to take care if there's mold in these fire stations. Funding is available already to take care of that.
Absolutely, Commissioner. There has always been funding every year for that. There is funding. So,
Okay.
and I will tell you now that I've heard that this evening, I will make sure that we respond to that right away.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
I think I said all that I needed to say.
Okay, with that, look for a motion to adopt resolution number 2021-45, setting the millage levy for the fiscal year 2021-22 at 4.1876.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner
Second.
Bankson, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Got 4 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Okay.
Mayor,
Yeah.
for the trim process, can you read the full Rate into the record. On the staff report, it's the second paragraph on that millage rate staff report. If you can read that into the record. The percentage over the rollback
Okay.
rate, that's a requirement from the trim.
In accordance with the truth and millage trim statutory requirements, the city must adopt a millage rate prior to adopting the annual budget. The recommended millage rate is 4.1876 mills, which is a 2.57% increase over the rolled back rate of 4.0825. A millage rate of 4.1876 generates approximately $17,658,255 in property tax revenues for the upcoming fiscal year 2021-22. All right, next up, I need a motion to approve resolution number 2021-46, adopting the annual budget for the fiscal year 2021-2022.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Smith,
Second.
second by Commissioner Bankson. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1 with Becker in the opposition. Okay, with that, we will close the budget hearing, and we'll take a 5-minute breather and come back and take up the city council business.